Welcome into today's show, guys. I'm feeling nostalgic. I'm feeling really, really nostalgic because 14 years ago today, pigs flew and the New Orleans Saints went to the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history. So let's celebrate greatness. Let's celebrate the anniversary. Let's get 500 likes on today's video to send some love to Garrett Hartley and the New Orleans Saints for going to the Super Bowl so long ago. And hey, maybe if we get enough likes, they'll make it back to the postseason and the Super Bowl this year. All right, diving into today's show, we're discussing the Mel Kiper mock draft 1.0 that just dropped for all 32 teams, actually. I'm about to say just for the Saints, but for all 32 teams. And so for today's video, I'm going to go through all of the picks leading up to the Saints selection, dive into that pick and give my analysis, and then at the end of the video, I got a jersey swap for the player, and we're going to dive into the rest of the picks that Kiper had, just so we can all be smarter NFL fans, right? That's what we're here to do. So let's dive into it. Number one, no shockers here, Caleb Williams, but a big-time shock at number two, Jayden Daniels jumps Drake Maye after the draft process, the combine, all the workouts and everything to be the number 2 pick over in Washington. Drake Maye heads over to New England. Marvin Harrison Jr., a BPA pick, goes to the desert and helps out Kyler Murray. Brock Bowers is headed over to L.A. with Justin Herbert. Malik Nabers, the wide receiver out of LSU, maybe could be the next Odell. I think the Giants might hope that. That's why they took him at number 6. Joe Alt, a great offensive lineman prospect, heads over to the Music City. Dallas Turner, a guy that I'm pretty high on, heads over to the Dirty Birds, unfortunately. But Rome Odunze heads to Chicago. Olu Fashanu shores up that O-line in New Jersey, I guess. Nate Wiggins, a really lengthy and talented cornerback out of Clemson, goes to the Minnesota Vikings, and Laitu Latu to the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton. I absolutely love that pick, and I love that prospect. But here's who the New Orleans Saints were selecting. Per Mel Kiper, Saints have selected Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU. He's the third LSU Tiger to go off the board at this point in the mock draft. He was 6'4", 205 pounds. He's a really fast football player. He's a wide receiver too behind Malik Nabers. He can be a very deep vertical threat, and he can work from the outside. He can work on the inside at the slot position because of his great speed. He also has really great ball tracking skills, and he has phenomenal burst with big playability. I do like this pick, and I'm going to give some more thoughts here, but I don't know if it's the biggest need for the Saints. But if you stick around, like I said, we got a Brian Thomas Jr. Saints jersey swap that my girlfriend, Maddie the Baddie, made, so I encourage you to just hang out a few more minutes and see what that jersey swap looks like. It's absolutely fresh. But here's Mel Kiper on that pick. Derek Carr had an up-and-down debut season in New Orleans, and his sizable contract almost certainly means he'll be back as the starter in 2024. He will be back as the starter. For the record, Derek Carr is your QB1. But what do we know about the playmakers around him? Chris Olave is a star who's put up back-to-back seasons with over 1,000 yards. After that, there's some big questions. Kind of disagree. Michael Thomas will likely move on this offseason. I could see that. While Alvin Kamara has regressed in recent years, and while Rashid Shaheed has shown he can be a useful complementary receiver, Carr could use another asset in the receiving game to try and boost his offense. So Brian Thomas Jr., in terms of the production for him, 68 receptions, over 1,000 yards. Really good production for the receiver out of LSU. 17 touchdowns, and he had more touchdowns than Malik Nabers, fun fact, and he averaged 17.3 yards per catch. I think Brian Thomas Jr. would be really fun in New Orleans. Correction on the screen, it was 1,177 yards, so sorry about the typo there. Totally cool, though. You get the idea, though. The production was really good. And I think that Brian Thomas Jr. feels like a really great Michael Thomas replacement. Go from Thomas to Thomas. Works out, right? But like I asked a minute ago, is wide receiver their biggest need? I'm not necessarily sold that it is. I think that the trenches need to be shored up. I think offensive line, defensive line, much more important. Hell, I'd even argue linebackers more important than wide receiver. I think you got some good pieces in Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, A.T. Perry. You got 3 young guys that are good football players. So I want you to let me know, what position should New Orleans draft first? Wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, or other. This is your time to get creative. This is your time to share your thoughts and let me know. But I want you guys to let me know what position the Saints should draft. And while you're down there, we got a link in the comment section description for Game Time. It is my favorite ticketing app, and I absolutely love it. And I just want to say thank you to Game Time for helping me create so many memories in 2023. But in 2024, it's your turn. So if you go to Game Time and you use promo code SaintsChat, you get $20 off your first purchase. You can go to Jazz Fest. You can catch a Pels game. Go check out anything going on around New Orleans. There's always live concerts. There's comedy shows. There's all sorts of fun events to go to. And if you are planning on going to the big game in Las Vegas, if you use our code BIGGAME, with Vegas one, or if you use code Vegas 100 for the big game, you will be able to get $100 off your ticket to the big game. And I know Vegas, $100. No, it's going to be a few $1,000s for the ticket, but think about it this way: $100 in Vegas can go a really long way. You put $100 down on a roulette table, it hits. You're feeling really good about yourself. So go download the Game Time app. Any returning or new users can use the big game code Vegas100. But if you're a first-time user and you don't want to go to the big game, just use code SaintsChat for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, diving into the possible wide receiver group, here is what the stats look like all next to each other. Chris Olave over 1,000 yards. Rashid Shaheed, he's an all-pro punt returner. I think he's going to start earning his flowers and getting some more recognition next season. He was absolutely incredible. A.T. Perry, very, very limited production. He was a healthy scratch for the first part of the season because Michael Thomas was able to go. I love what I've seen out of A.T. Perry, and I absolutely want him to be a bigger part of this offense. Brian Thomas Jr., though, could add another element, and I love the player. So here's more from Mel Kiper on Brian Thomas Jr. He said that Thomas, the third of the LSU offensive players off the board in this projection, led the FBS with 17 touchdown catches last season while averaging 17.3 yards per reception. He had just 3 drops on 93 targets. That's really impressive. And he can take the top off the defenses and be a stellar number 2 option as a rookie. Plus, the born and raised Louisiana kid wouldn't have to leave home. So let's look at the depth chart because there are some guys who are going to be leaving in free agency or who could leave in free agency. Michael Thomas, he has some stuff going on with his contract where he will likely not be back next season. I would not be surprised if the Saints do not return number 13. Rashid Shaheed, he is an exclusive rights free agent, meaning the Saints get to offer him a contract for it. He's not going anywhere. Rashid Shaheed will be on the team next year. Lynn Bowden is a restricted free agent. Keith Kirkwood is a free agent as well. But you have A.T. Perry and Chris Olave as, not as free agents or with no designation in free agency. So I do think that wide receiver is a need. I'm totally okay with drafting a wide receiver for the record. I actually am a believer every year, doesn't matter when, go draft a wide receiver. I am an absolute sucker for wide receiver depth, and I don't want the Saints to have to rely on Keith Kirkwood and Traquan Smiths of the world to be your wide receiver 1 and 2. So I think you go draft a wide receiver, maybe not round 1, maybe like later in the draft because that's where you got A.T. Perry, and he seems to be working out pretty well. But as promised, here's that jersey swap for you, Saints fans. Look how fresh Brian Thomas Jr. looks in that black and gold color rush. Shout out to my girlfriend, Maddie. Thank you for making this edit for me. I appreciate you, as do all the Saints fans. They love this edit. If you guys like the edit too, just give me a fire emoji in the chat, like the video, just show some love. I think this is a pretty cool edit, so I just wanted to share it here on the channel. But let's round out the mock draft, go through the final picks. We're kind of a speed run here. So you got Terrion Arnold going before the New Orleans Saints selection to the Raiders. Keon Coleman afterwards. J.J. McCarthy, for some unknown reason, gets drafted in round 1. I just don't get it. I'm sorry. I don't understand it. Cooper DeJean, he goes number 17 overall. J.C. Latham, who's been rumored to the Saints, goes to the Bengals at Cincinnati. Jared Verse, also a guy who's been linked to the Saints, heads over to L.A. to team up with Sean McVay in that Rams defense. Kamari Lassiter, cornerback out of UGA, heads over to the Steel City. You got a bunch of guys in the trenches going to the Dolphins, Eagles, Texans, and Cowboys. And then a few more picks. Kingsley Sumatia, I believe that's how you pronounce it. If I butchered it, I'm so sorry. Chop Robinson heads over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like that prospect. He's a little bit more of a project than a guy who's ready to go right now. Definite attributes guy, but talented player nonetheless. Tyler Guyton heads to the desert. Adonai Mitchell, gives Josh Allen some help. Do they move on from Stephon Diggs? Who knows? Troy Franklin, the wide receiver out of Oregon, who's weirdly impressive and has not gotten a lot of buzz. Goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. They need all the wide receiver help they can get. Keenwan Mitchell to the Lions. Ennis Rakestraw Jr. from Mizzou to the Ravens. And rounding it out, Amarius Mims to the Niners. So let me know, Saints fans, in the comment section, who do you want New Orleans to draft in round 1? I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. And just so you guys can have some context here, shout out to Matthew Peterson for giving me this information. Here's kind of how Mel Kiper's mock draft shook out. And this is purely on players that went in round 1. This has nothing to do with where they landed because that's even harder to do. But in January, remember, there's only 31 picks last year. So in January, he had 21 of 31 picks correct. In February, 24 of 31. March, 25 of 31. And in April, 26 of 31, which is actually not too bad considering there's a lot of picks and a lot of players that teams could go and draft. So thank you guys for tuning in to today's video. As always, I greatly appreciate you. And if you made it to the end of the video, we're doing something right. So hit that sub button, lock us in. And as always, y'all stay golden. See you next time.